In this presentation, I wanted to present the results of a study that I did with Professor Sanjay Goyal last spring, in 2013, with University of Albany students. We set out to address a very basic question: what type of messages would be most likely to deceive students? We started with some basic hypotheses or research questions, I guess I should say. We wanted to look and see the extent to which the framing of the message as a loss or a gain would influence the susceptibility of students to phishing. May recognize right away the implications for prospect theory. We would think, according to prospect theory, that the negative or loss frame would be more effective than a potential gain frame. But we also want to look at the effect of things like social motives and altruistic motives as well. So we set out to test this, got cooperation from ITS, went through IRB approval, and actually sent out fake messages to University of Albany students last year to see how many would be deceived. So let me describe the study to you. Okay, we basically used all juniors and seniors at University at Albany, working with ITS. We were able to use their actual Albany emails. Total sample was 7,225. We created 8 email conditions. I'll get to those in just a second. And then for each of these conditions, we stratified the sample by major and gender. We wanted to do some exploratory analysis, and see if the major field of the student influenced their susceptibility. So we used gross categorizations of business, science, technology, and math, social sciences and humanities. And then we also stratified it by gender. So think about it as 8 conditions, and then within each of those 8 conditions, we randomly assigned students to one of the 8 email conditions. Okay, so we got our sample, broke it down into those 8 categories of gender times major field. Within each of those 8 cells of a 4x2 matrix, we then further we randomly assigned individuals to one of 8 email conditions. And again, I'll show you those in a second. The emails were sent out over a 3-day period last April. The links in the email took the users to a website that explained the study and provided anti-phishing tips. So by clicking on the link, they thought they were going to whatever website the email message mentioned, but in actuality, we took them to a site that we created specifically and said, "You've been phished. Here's here's why we're doing this study, and here's some anti-phishing tips." And we also asked them to fill out a survey. As I said before, we had institutional review board approval for the study, and ITS were our co-investigators. Here's the phishing manipulation. We came up with, ultimately used 8 email conditions. 2 had what I would call a straight gain-win frame. These messages, these are the actual, what I have here are the actual title lines for the email. So what was in the title line of the email messages that the students received. So for the 2 gain-win messages, it was a $50 gift card for completing our survey, get a free iPad mini for taking it for a test drive. We had 2 lost messages. One was a classic bank card fraud message that many of you probably have received. Second is action needed to keep course registration open. Okay, so this is like threat or loss of course registration. This, by the way, April 2013 was right after pre-registration had taken place, so most students had completed their course registrations for the fall. By the way, I should also quickly mention these were rising juniors and seniors, so current sophomores and juniors, so people will be juniors and seniors this 2014 season, so that they all had course registrations. We also had 2 social messages in there. One, volunteers needed for hurricane victims, looking at sort of not altruistic motives in people. One to join a UAlbany Friends Network. So those are sort of our two social messages. And there are two additional messages, and I think they start out to be in the gain frame as well. But there's little nuances to them. One sort of matched a gain frame, get a free firewall with sort of protection against loss. So free firewall to protect your computer. The other was tuition assistance. Thought of something that might be highly relevant to students and may capture their attention. So those are the 8 phishing manipulations. Again, sent to all sophomores and juniors last spring who were rising juniors and seniors for this 2014 year. Here's an actual example of one of the email manipulations or email messages that was sent out. This is the $50 gift card condition, saying here $50 for completing a short survey. Ludlow Corporation, blah blah blah. Here's a link. Again, sort of looking somewhat official. We have an Albany EDU address and a SurveyMonkey link. I should also mention that we use specific software that would capture whether the email was opened. Okay, and then obviously when they went to our website, we were able to capture whether or not they clicked on the link. So clicking on the link, this one for example, would take them to our website, which was we could record whether they actually landed there. And we had separate websites for each of the 8 conditions, so we knew which links were opened. So for each email that was sent, we knew which email was opened and which link was clicked. Okay? All right, so let's look at some of the results. First of all, in terms of how many of these messages were actually opened and how many of the links were clicked. Well, we sent, again, 7,225 emails. 1,943 of them were open. So that's an open rate of 27%. That actually is a little bit heartening. Just roughly a quarter of the students opened the email. The rest of them either ignored it or recognized it as spam or some sort of phishing attempt, did not open it. It could also just be that students don't check their emails. 935 students clicked on the link in the email. So this is a 13% click rate. So overall of the 7,225, 13% of the students fell for the phishing message, or at least were deceived enough to click the link. And remember, in phishing attempts, that's the first step. You click the link and then you're to the website, which usually asks you to divulge information. We did not feel we could actually ask them to divulge information, so that would perhaps be the perfect studies if we could actually get that, but that wasn't in our IRB approval. So 13% clicked the link in the email, but you think about it, this is nearly half of those who opened the email. So if the student opened the email, half of those who opened it were actually still deceived or curious enough at least to click the link. Okay, so overall, the click and open rates don't seem to be that high, perhaps. But it's very interesting if you break it down or look by the type of email message. Things get much more interesting. What I have graphed here is the percent of email messages that were opened. Okay, by condition. As you can see, the bank card and friends condition had very few people even open the email. So those bank card fraud messages that we've got, this is a case where students are savvy. Most people are savvy enough to say that those are fake. Volunteer, this should be a donate time, so volunteer and friends did not do as well either. But if you look over here, over 50% of students clicked on the link for registration. So clearly registration gets their attention. Undergraduates who've gone through advisement, they got their perfect schedule. They don't want to lose that. Tuition assistance, gift card, iPad, firewall. These things were clicked, were opened. The I have to apologize. I just looked at this. This should be switched. iPad and tuition assistance should be switched. That was something wrong with my graph when I made this. So the second highest is actually iPad, and tuition assistance should be down here. The chi-squared post-hoc comparisons so for statistical tests to see which of these response rates were significantly different, statistically significantly different from each other. The response rate, those post-hoc comparison tests showed that the registration condition led to a higher open rate, or the open rate for the registration condition was statistically significantly higher than in the iPad and gift card condition. So again, this should be iPad, and gift card. Those two were statistically significantly greater than the tuition and firewall condition. Again, this should be tuition. And those two were higher than the donate, or the donate your time volunteer condition, which was significantly greater than the friends and bank card condition. Okay, so you can sort of see the stepwise progression here. It gives a high sample size, so those who are statistically savvy know that this is an overpowered situation, so that this difference, this mean is statistically different than these two, these two were not different from one another, but were different from these two. These two were not different from each other, but were different from this one, and this one was different from these two, who were not different from each other. Very similar thing happened for click rate, okay? Except for now you sort of see a condition, and I made the same mistake. Once again, put iPad over here and tuition assistant over there. You see that registration led to a click rate of over 35% overall. Okay, so and if you remember, it's like a 50% of the people who received the email opened it. Of those 50%, 35% of them, overall 35% of the individuals clicked on the link. So a high proportion, excuse me, of those who received the email message were actually clicking on it. So the post-hoc comparison showed that the registration condition was higher than the iPad, gift card, and tuition conditions, which are all the same. Again, these two should be switched. In this case, it doesn't matter because statistical tests showed that they were not statistically significantly different. That this group here was significantly lower click rate than the registration, but significantly higher than these four down here, which were not significantly different from one another. So we had a nice clear step progression. Those who received the registration email were significantly more likely to click on the link in the email than those who received the iPad, gift card, and tuition assistance ones, and they in turn were significantly more likely to click on the link than these four conditions. Okay. We also looked at message condition by and look at open and click rates by message condition and participant gender. There was slight evidence that females were more likely to click on the phishing, to open the phishing email than males. And this is especially the case in the gift card and the registration conditions. But again, it was a very, very slight difference. And for the actual click rates, there was no difference between males and females. So females showed a slight tendency to open up the gift card and the registration emails more than males, but they were not more likely to click on the links. Differences by majors. There's very few differences were found. I won this bet with Professor Goyle. I did not think there would be. He did. Business and social science majors were more likely to open an email message than humanity majors, but there's no differences in click rates. So there's very little difference that susceptibility to phishing varied by your major or by your gender for that matter. What was found, or what we did find, is that things that matter to undergraduates, especially things that they want to protect, and things that may be of value to them, they're more likely to be deceived by. So the desire to protect things of value and the opportunity to obtain valued objects are motives that make people susceptible to phishing. That's one implication from our research. The results also support the conclusion that loss aversion is particularly powerful. Again, over 1/3 of the sample followed the link for loss registration. Again, this might not sound like a lot, but again, in social engineering and phishing attempts, all you need is 1 or 2 people to fall for it. And here, 1/3 of the sample is at least following the link for the loss registration condition, or the threat of losing a registration. I should also, mention we don't know if they would actually have gone on and given any personal information, but at least they're at that landing page where they might. And it's also the case that the lure of free goods is also enticing. 1 in 5 students in the iPad and gift card condition responded to that. Okay, so those are the results of our study. Thought they were sort of interesting and would share them with you. Relates a little bit to the readings that we had, or that were assigned to you. Bottom line is that loss aversion and the lure of free goods seem to be the things that make students most susceptible to deceit.